British retailers have been struggling as consumers clamp down on spending due to high inflation, muted wage growth, worries about unemployment and government spending cuts. Now, this is of course dampening hopes that British shoppers will help get the economy back on track. Joining me now in the studio is Nigel Palmer, a retail consultant for Den Creative. Nigel, thank you very much for coming into the studio. Now, first of all, if we talk about high street shopping, consumer mitigation to online retail spending is also taking its toll. Now, we've got a report from the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills. They say that retail spending in town centres fell to 42% of total UK retail spending from 49% in 2000. Now, it is projected to fall to 40% by 2014. What's your view on this?
The British High Street has been changing for a number of decades, and I think it's brought into focus by the current underperformance of retail and the difficult economy. If you look back 10 or 20 years, people visited their high streets frequently because they were buying fresh fruit, and the supermarkets took away that reason for coming frequently to the high street. What happened is the shops on that high street changed, and if you look now, the mix of shops that's left on the high street is very different to what it was 20 years ago. The sad fact is that 16% of the UK retail high street is actually empty at the moment. And I think what it says is that the retail high street cannot play as big a part as it did in the past in the future. And if you look to out of towns and you look forward, that's where some of that growth is going. So it's not that retail is diminishing, it's moving. And I think if you look at current demand, who's trying to open shops on the high street? People like betting shops rather than grocers shops going back. So the fundamental mix is changing on the high street, and the competition from out of towns particularly and shopping centres has increased as people want a one-stop shop, from the supermarkets change on the high street to that great environment that a shopping centre creates.
The number of retailers going into administration is rising. Is this a trend that you see likely to continue given the business confidence under pressure and the squeeze on people's pockets?
We've talked about the high street, and I think a number of them, if you look at why they're going into administration, have a property legacy. They signed institutional leases for a great length of time that today, if they were designing their business model, they simply wouldn't do that. The UK high street has seen these pre-packs going on, and if you look at more recently, somebody like La Senza, 146 shops, surviving is 60 shops, which really meant that a lot of those shops were not profitable. So administration, I do see some more going into administration, not just because of legacy property issues, but because they don't necessarily have the point of difference that they did before. And the third factor, I think, is that the internet, whilst people seeing it as a threat, is something they perhaps haven't embraced or just layered costs in. Because the internet, I don't think, is a threat. I think what we're hearing now is this lovely phrase of omni-channel. In other words, you have to make it all work together. And we've seen shops, for example, HMV, who not only didn't embrace the internet, but also didn't embrace what it was doing for their product. So retailers should be looking to how they make it work together, but without layering huge cost in and ensuring that their retail estate is profitable. And this is where I think the property industry also has to come to play, because at the moment, they're still not, I think, working closely enough with the UK retailers to understand what having a non-profitable shop means. Ultimately, it leads to these businesses closing.
What about franchising? This seems to be becoming a popular route and is one sector of the retail sector that seems to be able to pull itself out of the ruins of the economic uncertainty. Is this a solution perhaps to part of the problem?
I think franchising is an opportunity. It is a solution at two ends, really. First of all, for the individuals, for those entrepreneurs, for those people who have the passion to start their own business, but don't necessarily have all of the business skills. And if you can match a franchise with somebody of the same sort of culture who loves and embraces that product, then it is an opportunity. Clearly, one of the stumbling blocks is financing, because there is an amount of capital to put up front, not an insignificant amount for an individual. And certainly a lot of food shops, Pizza Hut, 80% of those people are franchised, but to the consumer you wouldn't know that. So franchising has a place there. I mentioned earlier La Senza. La Senza is effectively a franchise. It's a Canadian operation that was franchised in the UK. And here, interestingly, one of the best franchisees in the world, the Al Shire Group for the Middle East, have taken that franchise on for the UK. So franchises work at two levels, individual level and also corporate level as well. And they enable the entity, for example, the Senza, to make sure that they can expand without having huge amounts of capital. And the key in both cases, in the small case and the big case, is to choose the partner that matches the culture of your business with the same desires and passions. I don't think it'll be the answer to the current economic climate, but it's certainly something that should play a part.
Now, in relation to everything we've just discussed, Nigel, what's your outlook then for the UK retail sector? Do you see it being suppressed for the remainder of 2012 and into 2013 or not?
I think when you look at it objectively, I can see no stimulus that is really going to change the current sort of climate. The UK consumer is still under pressure. The sentiment isn't changing. The economics are not going to change, I think, over the course of the next 12 months. And the retailers themselves are under pressure in the supply chain with cost price inflation in China and also raw materials going up as well. And they work really hard to suppress those to make sure there isn't inflation there and give great values for customer. Retailers are inventive in terms of what they do, and they have to cope and take advantage of the internet. And I think that's where some people will move ahead. But undoubtedly, overall, the market is not getting greatly bigger. Mm-hmm. There will be those winners that embrace the omni-channel, the internet and the stores together. But I don't see substantial change in the next 12 months.
Nigel, thank you very much again for coming into the studio.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
So there we have it, Nigel Palmer on the UK retail sector. Now, for more exclusive interviews on Dukascopy TV, do stay tuned. But for the moment, goodbye.